Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Panay. In today's podcast, we'll be talking about spiritual vision, what it is and how to develop it according to A Course in Miracles. I'll be reading from an essay I wrote called The Turning Point, and it is taken from a book I wrote called The Bridge of Return, A Course in Miracles as a Western Yoga. Let's begin with the essay. The Turning Point. Most students of A Course in Miracles would be familiar with the story behind the course's inception, outlined in its preface by Helen Schucman. Helen and Bill Thetford were professors of medical psychology at Columbia University's College of Physicians and Surgeons, experiencing all the strains associated with personal and professional acceptance and status, when one day Bill gave Helen his seminal "There Must Be Another Way" speech. As Helen recounts, psychologist, educator, conservative in theory and atheistic in belief, I was working in a prestigious and highly academic setting, and then something happened that triggered a chain of events I could never have predicted. The head of my department unexpectedly announced that he was tired of the angry and aggressive feelings our attitudes reflected, and concluded that there must be a better way. As if on cue, I agreed to help him find it. Apparently, this course is the other way. End of quote. A reference to this episode occurs in Chapter 2 of the course, where it states that because our identification with the ego and its thought system of separation is painful, it is only a matter of time before we all make the call for a better way. Quote, "Tolerance for pain may be high, but it is not without limit. Eventually, everyone begins to recognise, however dimly, that there must be a better way. As this recognition becomes more firmly established, it becomes a turning point. This ultimately reawakens spiritual vision, simultaneously weakening the investment in physical sight." End of quote. Subtitle: Spiritual Vision. Until this turning point of wanting another way of dealing with things and experiencing the world, our way has been the ego's way, which means identifying first and foremost as a body, thereby perceiving that our peace and happiness, our equilibrium even, is at the mercy of forces beyond our control. You could call it the way of emotional dependency. There is no way of identifying with the ego and not feeling victimized by people and circumstances, regardless of what the objective reality might be. There is no way of identifying with the ego and not holding a grievance. The ego in the Course differs from the general psychological term because it refers to our belief in separation from God and is the part of us that likes our separate existence. Ego identification is maintained by believing that the answer to our lack of peace lies outside our mind. This is what the Course calls the ego's plan for salvation, a cunning manoeuvre to keep us from going within, where we can change our mind to identify with the wholeness of our spiritual self. This is a quote from Workbook Lesson 71. The ego's plan for salvation centres around holding grievances. It maintains that if someone else spoke or acted differently, if some external circumstance or event were changed, you would be saved. Thus, the source of salvation is constantly perceived as outside yourself. The change of mind necessary for salvation is thus demanded of everyone and everything except yourself. End of quote. Perception, or the way we interpret what goes on outside us, is geared to fulfill the ego's plan. You can think of a sheepdog herding a flock of sheep through a particular gate. If the gate represents developing a grievance and the sheep our different sensory input, then the sheepdog represents our ego, marshalling those inputs together to go through the grievance gate. Yet, with only the body senses to perceive, we'll be so sure that our judgments are right. In the Course, spiritual vision is provided by the Holy Spirit, an aspect of our mind that sees beyond bodies and behaviour, to the spirit that is our true identity. Quote, "When you have been caught in the world of perception, you are caught in a dream. You cannot escape without help because everything your senses show merely witnesses to the reality of the dream. End of quote, and that is taken from the preface. The Holy Spirit mediates between the two worlds, and so he can answer the true call behind anyone's seemingly unkind behaviour, a call for help and union, having themselves identified with the shame and guilt of separation. As it says in the preface, quote, Christ's vision is the Holy Spirit's gift, God's alternative to the illusion of separation and to the belief in the reality of sin, guilt, and death. It is the one correction for all errors of perception, the reconciliation of the seeming opposites on which this world is based. End of quote. Opposites. The world is full of them. If we're not identified with the strength of Christ within, we'll be over-identified with some aspect of our physical existence, our gender, age, economic status, postcode, appearance, political affiliation, tastes and preferences, priming us to feel in opposition to those who lie on the other side of the spectrum. All we need is a news report, an election, or an insensitive comment from someone, and our guns will be drawn. Though on the level of form we may appear on opposite sides of a divide, when we're experiencing in a conflict, we're essentially the same as our counterpart. We both share the pain of separation, and we both share the need to remember our holy self. Spiritual vision helps us do this because it perceives beyond the body, recognising the call for help and union behind someone's ego-based words or behaviour and our own defences. Quote, the only judgment involved is the Holy Spirit's one division into two categories, one of love and the other the call for love. You cannot safely make this division, for you are much too confused either to recognise love or to believe that everything else is nothing but a call for love. You are too bound to form and not to content. End of quote. I'll just like to say here, whenever we're caught in the world of opposites, we'll either identify ourselves too as a victim or a victimiser. In terms of our interactions with other people, we'll feel guilty if we feel that we've been abusive in some way to them, or we'll feel victimised if we feel they've been abusive to us. We won't acknowledge or be able to see our own call for help or somebody else's call for help when we're in the ego mindset. The ego is all about opposites in terms of victim and victimiser, guilt and innocence. And so somehow that aspect of victim and victimiser will be associated with all those other opposites we talked about: gender, age, economic status, postcode, appearance, political affiliation, etc. Okay, carrying on. The irony is that while our counterpart might sometimes seem to be the bane of our existence, they provide an essential service to us by giving an opportunity to forgive ourselves for our own mistaken choice, healing our fearful self-concept. Quote, you cannot give yourself your innocence, for you are too confused about yourself. But should one brother dawn upon your sight as wholly worthy of forgiveness, then your concept of yourself is wholly changed. Your evil, inverted commas, your evil thoughts have been forgiven with his. End of quote. Subtitle, The New Beginning. A Course in Miracles uses the term turning point in one other place in the text. This occurs well down the track regarding the text's span in the second last chapter titled The New Beginning. Here the introduction states that now the goal of the course is clear to us, the focus will be the new beginning and providing some specific methods for attaining it. Reflecting on what has come before this new horizon in the curriculum, we can see an emphasis on elucidating the ego thought system in all its guises and how to distinguish it from the Holy Spirit's thought system, the ins and outs of special relationships, attack-defense cycles, the link between projection and perception, the motivation for holding grievances. All of these are just some things covered in the 29 preceding chapters. By chapter 30, we have, paraphrasing the course, learned how to look on problems as they are and not the way we've set them up. We've learnt about our belief in sin and guilt and how this generates fear, of the savage search for sin in others to displace our self-accusations, and of the search for completion in special relationships. We've also learnt that our goal is inner peace, not changes in the world, though they may happen as a byproduct if they are part of our atonement path. In terms of the latter, it's best to reflect on the Zen adage, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. If the outer does change, it won't be experienced as a big deal because we have firmly established inner peace as our goal. We accept that the only value in any situation is the opportunity it provides for practicing forgiveness, thereby remembering our spiritual self. In this way, our mind remains open to inspiration in whatever form that takes. We have certainly come a long way by this stage in the course, and now a specific method is given for helping us attain our goal of peace and embark on the new beginning. This method is contained in the section Rules for Decision, where we again come across a turning point. As the section's introduction states, the ideas contained there aren't new, however, some rules of thought are provided for practice so that they become habitual ways of responding, readily accessible when needed. Subtitle: Rules for Decision. Throughout the course, we see an emphasis on recognising how a choice made within our minds sets us up for experiencing the world in a particular way. That choice is always between two thought systems or two teachers, the ego and the Holy Spirit. In Rules for Decision, a process of inner questioning is outlined to help us in times of distress, particularly when we feel justified in our perceptions. If we don't feel at peace, we know we have judged a situation through the ego's eyes and have, therefore, come up with our own ideas about how we should react and what we should do. At such times, our mind is closed to help, and we are likely to feel attacked by the idea that there is another way of perceiving things. We don't want to be told we're wrong. The rules for decision meet our resistance with a process of gentle persuasion designed to engage our will in healing. As this section points out, the speed by which we can reach our goal of peace depends on one thing alone: our willingness to practice every step. Some statements are then given for us to say to ourselves to open our mind to correction, culminating in the following: at least I can decide I do not like what I feel now, and so I hope I have been wrong. Our resistance to being wrong now undone, we are brought to the turning point. Quote, now you have reached the turning point because it has occurred to you that you will gain if what you have decided is not so. Until this point is reached, you will believe your happiness depends on being right. But this much reason have you now attained. You would be better off if you were wrong. End of quote. As the Course says, love waits on welcome, not on time. And this welcome waits on a willingness to be wrong. The extent of our resistance to resigning as our own teacher is clear in the gentle, patient nature of the rules for decision, such as those that follow the turning point. Now we're willing to hope for another way and can say without conflict, I want another way to look at this. Perhaps there is another way to look at this. What can I lose by asking? And so, here toward the end of the text, we return to where we began in chapter 2 and to the very sentiments that inspired the scribing of the Course. We would be happy to be wrong and hope there is a better way. The difference now is that we know there is indeed a better way and what that way is about. Before, we only knew what we were saying no to. Now, we can also say yes to the real alternative. Now we have the strength of affirmation to help us on our way. Like the night sea journey of the sun, a motif appearing in mythologies of many cultures. Now, I'll just explain what the night sea journey motif is. So the sun rises in the east and it sets in the West. Ancient cultures used to have an analogy about the sun, that as it set in the west, it went on a deep, dark journey into the ocean, all the way overnight to then arrive in the east to rise again. So that is the night sea journey of the sun motif. So I'll repeat that sentence again. Like the night sea journey of the sun, our forgiveness journey began with a descent into the dark depths of Hades, where we learnt about the thought system of death that is there. And now, like the sun in the east, we have begun the process of resurrection, rebirth, and a glad awakening to what is bright and true. Now, whenever the world seems too much with us, all we need do is remind ourselves of what we want, recalling the following question from the Course. Quote, "Do you prefer that you be right or happy?" That is the end of the essay. So the emphasis in this essay and in the Course, where it uses the word the turning point, is what do we want? Are we happy now? Are we willing to be wrong? Are we willing to doubt our own perceptions and the conclusions and judgments we have made about ourselves, about others, and about the world? If we are ready to say, no, there must be a different way, then that opens us up to spiritual vision. That is the question that actually got us, whether that question was conscious or not, that got us involved with reading A Course in Miracles in the first place. That's what attracted us to it. And 30 or so chapters later, after reading it, we come to another part where we've learned all so much about the ego thought system and about our perceptions and about our relationships and projection and guilt and all of that, that we come again to that question, are you willing to let go of your way of perceiving things? The idea being that we've experienced enough through our process and practice of forgiveness to be able to make another commitment, to kind of reinforce our first commitment to say, yes, I've had enough experience to know I'm better off being wrong. And then to really apply that with these rules of decision to every judgment thereon in. Now we know why we judge. Now we know what those judgments are about. We know when that's occurring. The emphasis at the turning point towards the end of the text is, what do you want to be the truth? Do you want to feel better? Or do you want to hold on to these grievances? And that will mean another shift in our degree of spiritual vision. The vision that doesn't project anything onto what is there. We just simply extend love. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of help. Tune in again. Bye.